All right, welcome everyone to a special bonus. I don't know if it's a bonus or what it is, but it's a special episode of Going the Distance, the Rocky series podcast. And sometimes, more often than not, we talk about Sylvester Stallone's news, projects, of course, the Rambo series. And this weekend we had a special event where Rambo Last Blood, the fifth film in the franchise, was released, and with me today is a special guest who has been on the show before. He goes by the beautiful name Zip from the No Redeeming Qualities podcast. And before you start talking, Zip, I just want to say to my listeners, listen to these guys. They're called the No Redeeming Qualities podcast. Bob and Zip are hilarious. I started with episode 1 as a purist, and I've gone all the way through all of your episodes, and I'm a legitimate fan of yours, so it's a pleasure and honor to have you on the show, Zip.
Oh, no, it's pleasure's all mine. So,
how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm ready to talk about this movie because I know you guys are super into Rocky, and I just never got into the Creed movies as much as everybody else, but I've always loved a good Rambo movie.
When I started my podcast, I thought to myself, what is it that I can talk about with very little preparation, because I'm busy and I'm lazy. That's a terrible combination. So I'm like, what can I talk about where I could just go in and talk about? And Stallone in general I could talk about, but I thought, well, let's focus it on the Rocky franchise because there's 8 films now. But that being said, Rambo was like second place to talk about. And there's been days where I'm like, oh, maybe I should have started with Rambo first. But can you believe, Zip, that we have a Rambo movie being released in 2019?
Honestly, I can't, because in 2008, when John Rambo came out, I was in high school, and me and Bob, the guy I do No Redeeming Qualities with, actually went like after school to go see it, and we said that. We said, can you believe we're watching a Rambo movie in 2008?
Oh, sure,
and
yeah.
And then now, first impressions, what did you think of it? Because it seems like it's one of those movies that the critics are hating, but the fans are enjoying.
What is your history of the Rambo franchise, personally?
I have kind of a unique one because my father used to actually, he wasn't doing this like, oh, I'm the cool dad. It was like, I don't have any other stories in my brain. And so he would tell random bedtime stories, and First Blood was one of them, the story of John Rambo. And then he got me the book when I was in like 5th grade. And so, yeah, I've always been fascinated with the character, and I'm happy to see the character get such a long movie arc, too. 5 movies over 30 plus years.
That's crazy. Your dad told you bedtime John Rambo stories?
He did. He wanted us to never forget about the Vietnam veterans.
That's awesome.
And a lot of it was funny, too, because as a kid, none of it made any sense to me.
Oh, no.
Like, at face value, because I'm like, why are these police harassing a Vietnam vet? Like, why would they do that? Like, like a naive 10-year-old. And there's a lot of people who seem to forget that the entire first Rambo movie is just him killing police officers.
He only killed one, and that was in self-defense.
That's right. Well, in the book, he does kill them. Like, yes. He flat out just murders them.
Right.
It's also funny to see just how it's evolved from First Blood. It's definitely more about the PTSD and the coming back from Vietnam to now. It's like this most recent one. I don't even think they really even talked very much about him being a Vietnam vet, did they?
I'll give a little bit of a brief history of my Rambo experience. I'm a little bit older than you. I'm 43, so I remember seeing First Blood on VHS when Rambo 2 wasn't even out yet. And I remember Rambo 2 being, a new film, and then I saw Rambo 3 in the theater. So that was my first theater experience, was Rambo Part 3. And my mother, bless her heart, she took me and 2 of my 3 brothers with me to the theater because it was rated R. And I think it's just so great that my mom took me to Rambo Part 3. And there was a scene, you remember in Part 3, where Rambo blows up the big Russian soldier in that hole with the grenade or whatever?
Yeah.
But my mom covered up my younger brother's eyes, thinking it was too gory back then.
I first saw it after 9/11.
Oh, wow.
Well, because, I was born in 89. we see it after 9/11, and they're like, yeah, those brave Taliban fighters in Afghanistan, and we were like, ooh, wow, like that was unexpected. Like,
yeah. Well,
because no idea the history, like,
of course.
No idea. You're just thinking like, wait a minute, John Rambo was with the Taliban? Like what? Like
that's what I've always said is Rocky stopped the Cold War, but he caused 9/11.
I never thought about that. Yeah, and then he takes a random stop in good old Burma for movie 4.
Right, of course. So let's talk about the enemies before we get to part 5, because that's obviously a hot topic. So the enemies, or the bad guys, in part 1 were, of course, the white police officer, small town police officer troop. They were, quote unquote, the bad guys, and if not the U.S. government and the general civilization with the way they treated the Vietnam vets, they were what caused John Rambo to not be taken care of properly after fighting for his country. So that was the message there. Part 2 was obviously, now it wasn't even the Vietnam weren't any more bad than U.S. soldiers are. They both fought a war. I always say the soldiers aren't the bad people. It's the people in charge.
Except for that one Rambo blew up with the bow and arrow. I mean,
yeah, he was a bit of a dick.
That guy had it coming.
But what I mean by that is soldiers are soldiers. They're just doing what they're doing what their government tells them to do. So again, in part 2, it's the American government. Everyone's white, and they're the ones who screwed over Rambo and left him there for dead while he's saving prisoners of war. Part 3, again, the bad people were white people. They were Russians. But again, a very very appropriate topic at the time.
I'm curious how you're going to blame Rambo 4 on the white man.
Because we know what the argument for part 5 is. And now part 4, of course, the Burmese incident, I don't think anyone in the U.S. has ever said, oh, gee, what they're doing to their people there is wonderful. So when Rambo took care of them in the fictional world of the world, where he takes care of these Burmese rapists and murderers, nobody complained. Now, 2019... Rambo has issues with people south of the border.
Yes.
And now this is a problem.
Well, I did read that as one of the reviews, that it's getting critiqued because of its depiction of Latino characters, which I live in Texas, not near the border. I'm about like 6-7 hours away from the border.
Sure.
But, I live amongst Hispanics. Maybe because I'm white. There was really nothing in the movie that jumped out to me as like an unfair caricature. Now, I may get crucified for saying that because there might have been something super insensitive that I'm white and it just completely blew past me. But I just thought, like, well, he's on a ranch in Arizona,
which is close to the.
I'm assuming that he's in the part of Arizona that's close to the border. You could live in Arizona and not be near the border, but I'm assuming he was near the border.
I think it's depicted that he's pretty close.
Yeah, and then he goes into a city in Mexico. A city in Mexico is going to be filled with a thing called Mexicans.
Weird.
And the whole point is that he's not saying like, oh, it's these dirty Mexicans you can't trust. It's these cartel members. They're gang members. They're sex slave, sex traffickers. Good. Like, cut them all to pieces. Like I didn't see what the big problem was. Did you? As somebody who's up north?
Any more than I saw a problem with a corrupt police force or a corrupt government. These are real issues. And unfortunately, there is, and not just in Mexico, but close to the United States is, of course, Mexico. And it's my understanding that there is sex trafficking that's an issue in Mexico.
100%. I mean, and I don't want to say like it's Mexico because I'm from Houston. Houston actually has a sex trafficking problem.
Sure.
New Orleans has a sex trafficking. It's anywhere with a giant port. Really, you know.
There you go. Okay.
And then the coyotes are the ones who bring them over the border, the land border, into the United States.
Oh, they're actually called something.
Well, actually, now that I think about it, a coyote is somebody who smuggles a human for any purpose.
Oh, wow.
So I guess you could just pay a coyote to smuggle you over the border. But
okay.
Anyway.
Nobody wants to buy me.
Did you ever read Punisher?
The comic?
Yeah.
Of course.
I would always get real excited when I would read Punisher if the new story arc started and it was about sex slaves or sex slavers, because you're just like, oh yeah, Punisher's gonna f these dudes up, and nobody's gonna feel an ounce of sympathy for them because it's like one of the worst professions you can be in.
Right.
is slavery.
Of course.
So as soon as he was setting it up for the cartel, like the girl was going down into Mexico, I thought this is going to be a sex slave thing. Like that's what they're setting it up for, and it was.
Right.
I do like how Rambo is bookend. The whole franchise is bookended, where it starts with Rambo committing domestic crimes, and it ends with him committing domestic crimes. Because when you think about it, like the scene where he kills the one guy where he goes into his house and he leaves the body without the head, I mean, that's like a horror movie.
My hot take is this is probably the greatest Rambo film that's not a Rambo film.
Yeah, you know...
This is where people are torn, I think, because this is a fun movie.
You
right?
could have had it be anybody, right? Is that what you're saying?
Almost.
Yeah,
Now, there are parts where, yes, we know it's Rambo, i.e. his name. If you were to watch this film, not having seen parts 1 through 4, you're going to enjoy this film as a moviegoer.
Yes.
If you like, violent action movies. It's Sylvester Stallone's Taken. If you use your own personal fandom and imagination of what is going on in Rambo's head, if you personally, as a viewer, fill in the blanks of why he's doing what he's doing, how he's doing it, then it's still a Rambo film.
The only real review I read of it was from David Morrell, the guy who wrote the original First Blood novel.
Right.
Where he critiqued the film because he's like, well, you could have just called the guy John Smith.
Sure.
So here's my problem. It's called Rambo Last Blood.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the responsibility is on the viewer. If you're going into a movie called Rambo Last Blood and you have no idea why it's called that, and then you're like, oh, is there another Rambo movie? And you're like, well, yeah, there's 4 of them. And you're like, oh, well, this is just a reboot, right? And it's like, well, no, you need to know what happens in order to understand this movie. And you're like, well, I'm going to go watch it anyway. And then you critique that. I don't know what to tell you. You're going in to the 5th movie expecting it all to make sense. And here's the thing. It does. If you told me I could only take this movie and only show it to people who had never heard of John Rambo, you could just barely tweak the script, tweak some of the action and the dialogue to really kind of expand on his background, and I think anybody would get the gist of what's happening.
Right. I mean, we see actual Vietnam footage at the beginning of the film, real news footage and on-the-ground footage of the Vietnam War, and we know this is playing in Rambo's head, so it doesn't take a genius to figure out that he's having PTSD flashbacks, even still to this day in his life, at the age of 73, as a veteran of Vietnam.
And the whole point of Rambo is that he is this weapon that doesn't want to fight, but he knows that he is a power that can make things happen. Does that make sense? Because it's
absolutely.
like, well, the first one he's motivated more out of self-preservation, but in the second one, it's ultimately for the POWs.
Mm-hmm.
The third one, it's ultimately for his colonel. The fourth one, it's ultimately for the missionaries. It's like that's the whole point. Is it's just like, yeah, no shit, Rambo would prefer not to do these things. What else is he supposed to do?
And what I love about this one, we actually leave off where part 4 left off, that he's on his family's ranch. And we're led to believe this is where he was born and raised. So this farm has been in his family, the Rambo family, for generations.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, he says at the end of the movie that he feels he's going to die in that rocking chair. The end narrative is insinuating that he was born there. He says that he was born here on this land and he'll die here, end his time here. So part 4 has him going to the ranch, but he hasn't been there in 3 decades. So he actually doesn't even know who's on the land. So we find out that this family has inherited or taken over the farm, so to speak. But we're just led to believe after 10 or 11 years, this family has welcomed, the owner back. Maybe he still has a claim to land. Who knows? They've let him live on the land, but, under the land in these tunnels that he feels safe in. But he's also been a part of this family, this young girl. Okay, and I really hope she gets a big shot in Hollywood, because she did really well in this film.
Well, my biggest critique with her was I honestly thought her father being a part of the plot was unnecessary. I think you could have had it just be the fat Shola friend, come down and party, and then I sell you out, because it implies that she actively sold this girl out to the traffickers because she's got the bracelet. well, that means she concocted a reason for her to see the father. It was a little unnecessarily complicated.
Well, she's such a good girl. In the film, we can see that she's kind of led a sheltered, protective life by the grandmother and Uncle John Rambo. And so for her to say that she's going to Mexico just to party with some friends, there's no way they would have let her go. But then again, she could have just escaped all the same. But I guess in her innocent mind, in her naive mind, she really was going to Mexico to ask her biological father, why did you leave me and my mother? And I guess in a real world situation, that's not a bad reason to seek out your biological parent, to have questions answered.
I don't know. It felt like piling it onto the character. Like you just threw like all that sadness on her, and now she's a sex slave, and now she's addicted to heroin, and now she's dead.
As we're talking about her character, that scene in the truck when Rambo rescues her from the sex workers, and she's, strung out on heroin, beaten to a pulp, and has been, raped multiple times, thankfully off screen. She's in the truck and she dies on her way to Arizona. Well,
that actually surprised me.
Yeah.
I didn't see that coming.
So give credit where credit's due for I say cliche, but for a standard, revenge type flick. I thought the revenge was just going to come from the fact that she was kidnapped, that she was taken into the slave trade, and that Rambo rescuing her back and messing up some of the crew was just going to send the Mexican cartel army to his ranch to avenge being,
yes.
How dare you mess with our stuff. But I actually thought it was even better because I was surprised by how I felt about her death, and seeing Rambo at this point, now that's it. He's going to go in Hulk rage mode.
I had thought that it was going to be like what you had said, where he brings her back, and then because they had the driver's license, they follow him.
Right, exactly.
Because while he was building and stuff, I thought, well, how did he have all this time to build all this crap if they're going to be right up the road? So I did like how they addressed that and had him go back and specifically just kill one of them, I guess, to entice them to...
Oh, he wanted them to be there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah. Like, he was totally trying to bring them in. I did have some problems with when they attacked his house.
Sure.
Because, and this is, it's an action movie, so don't critique it too hard. But
right.
If I'm one of these cartel thugs and you're planning this attack on this ranch and you're going into it thinking that this was supposed to be just some old man that you'll beat the shit out of, and then lo and behold, he manages to sneak back in, kill your security, kill all your people in your brothel, and then cut one of your leaders' heads off and throw it on the highway, I'd be like, okay, well, this is probably a little bit more dicey a situation than we thought when we were just beating this guy up. And what I'm getting at, is that they pull up and he makes all the everything explode, and they just keep going. I'm like, no, are you kidding me?
Nobody turned around and ran away.
Yeah, you would be like, this, leave, figure something out, and then come back. I just thought they were just like, yeah, gung-ho, in an open field, everybody running a giant compact squad. I don't know. It was, other than that, I was at the edge of my seat. All I wanted was the montage of him building all the weapons to be over so I could see them getting used. And it almost felt like a comedy because it just got to a point where I'm like, okay, Rambo, you have enough weapons. You don't need this many booby traps.
First Blood is like Rocky 1. That it's a perfect film. Like, as far as what it's meant to be, it's a 5 out of 5 for me. And same with Rocky 1's 5 out of 5. You can never beat the original. And then Rocky Balboa, the movie Part 6, Rocky Balboa, when it came out, it kind of came out to repair the damage of Part 5, right? Of the legacy of the Rocky character. Rambo 4... I think that was the intention as well. The Rambo 4, when it came out, it was kind of to bring back the grittiness, the darkness, of the Rambo character. But I have issues with Rambo 4, and to this day, it's still my least favorite of the Rambo films.
Really? What are your issues with it?
Length. I think character development. I know it sounds silly, but character development. The brutality is not an issue, though it was hard to watch the village get destroyed and things like that. But that's that's what's going on there. I felt like it ended on the second act. Like that firefight with the 50 cal, he takes out all these people in a great, amazing, fun scene with the 50 cal, but that was it. Okay? That was it. That was the Rambo's big fight, was the 50 cal. But he was sitting behind this thing, and then he guts the leader with a knife, and that was it. Okay? Let me read you something. You tell me if you recognize this quote about the Rambo character. This is Colonel Trowman speaking to Teasel.
I've come to get my boy.
Your boy?
I recruited him, I trained him, I commanded him in Vietnam for 3 years. I'd say that makes him mine.
I wonder why the Pentagon would send a full-bird colonel down here to handle this.
The Army thought I might be able to help.
Well, I don't know in what way. Rambo's a civilian now. He's my problem.
I don't think you understand. I didn't come here to rescue Rambo from you. I came here to rescue you from him.
Well, we all appreciate your concern, Colonel. And we'll try to be extra careful.
I'm just amazed that he allowed any of your posse to live.
Is that right?
Strictly speaking, he slipped up. You're lucky to be breathing.
That's just great. Colonel, you came out here to find out why one of your machines blew a gasket.
You don't seem to want to accept the fact that you're dealing with an expert in guerrilla warfare. With a man who's the best. With guns, with knives, with his bare hands. A man who's been trained to ignore pain. Ignore weather. To live off the land. To eat things that'll make a billy goat puke. In Vietnam, his job was to dispose of enemy personnel. To kill. Period. Win by attrition. Well, Rambo was the best.
Okay, Colonel, now you got us all scared to death. What do you in the Special Forces think I ought to do about your psycho out there?
Let him go. Do what? For now. Diffuse the whole situation. Diffuse him. Provide a little gap and let him slip through it. Then put out a nationwide APB. In a couple of weeks, you'll pick him up in Seattle or someplace working in a car wash. There'll be no fight and nobody else will get hurt.
I do my own work. I don't figure the best way to do that is to close my eyes and hope he gets picked up in Seattle.
Well, if you send your people in there after him, they'll get killed.
You know, we're just a small hick-town sheriff's department, Colonel, but we're expected to do our duty, just like our heroes in the Special Forces.
In Special Forces, we teach our people to stay alive in the line of duty.
No shit, I never thought of that.
You want a war you can't win?
Are you telling me that 200 men against your boy is a no-win situation for us?
You send that many, don't forget one thing.
What?
A good supply of body bags.
In Rambo Last Blood, this is what he does. We finally see the very thing that Colonel Troutman says that Rambo can do. In Rambo 4, we lost that opportunity. That's what made me so upset about Rambo 4 is I was like, why don't we see him do all the stuff? Granted, he did tear out somebody's throat with his bare hands. But the point I'm trying to say is in Part 5, we see this MacGyver setup trap situation that Colonel Troutman was speaking about, that Rambo was the best. So what he set up, that is about the best a soldier could do, I would say. You know what I mean by that? I know it's a movie and it's silly. Yeah, at the same time, to see this in the real world would be kind of silly and crazy. But we actually got to see Rambo be Rambo for the first time since he took out those cops in Part 1 when he used traps and everything and living off the land. And to see this again was just, I don't know, to see it done in such a way where finally we get to see Rambo in full Hulk mode.
It bookends because it started with that kind of the traps and
right,
this more home battle, and then it ends on this more of a home battle instead of, in a rice paddy in Burma.
Now, I'm not a fanboy. I've been accused of being a fanboy on Twitter, and it's frustrating. I hate when people say that, fanboy. Well, yes, I'm a fan of the franchise. Like, number one, I'm a fan. I'm not reviewing the Fast and Furious. You know what I mean? Like,
what do they say you're a fanboy about?
Well, I had actually one Twitter person saying that fanboys shouldn't do podcasts.
That's all who does podcasts.
It doesn't make sense to me. Like I'm not a fan of the Fast and Furious franchise. So would you want me to do a whole podcast on that franchise when I'm not a fan of it? What kind of dialogue would I be having? Like, of course I'm a fan.
But there are people who think that, though. They want, like, a totally impartial set of eyeballs on the product.
I know what they're saying by fanboy is that I see no error or wrong. Well, that's not true. Anyone that's listened to my podcast, I have critiqued every single Rocky film, and I've reviewed other Sylvester Stallone films where I absolutely abhor. And I say why. I think I spell it out nicely as to why some of his films really don't work, and for obvious reasons. Like, obviously, Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. I'm not a fanboy to the point where I don't recognize where things or opportunities are missed. That's why I didn't like Rambo 4. So everyone loved Rambo 4 because of the incredible, like, violence and the updated warfare or whatever. But my feeling of it was there was a third act that was missing, that it ended on the second act. Like, that's great that he did that 50 cal stuff, but I wanted to see another mission where he infiltrates the enemy base like he does in Rambo 3, and we see him take out the leader that way. But But having them hide behind his 50 cal, I thought it was a cheap out on Stallone's part.
It kind of makes you think of back when there was the Rambo cartoon, which was like super over the top, where he was flying like attack helicopters and stuff.
Right. Rambo 5, Last Blood. I'm torn because I feel like it's the best Rambo film that's not a Rambo film. However, it is a Rambo film, so I'm going to rate it. I think it's the second best Rambo film of the franchise.
Really? Over Rambo 2?
If not, it's tied. I'll tell you, like, honestly, yeah, maybe 1, 2, 5, then 3, 4. But it's so close because when it comes to a movie in the Rambo world of movies, okay, I'm talking the Rambo franchise. So I'm comparing this to Rambo films, not to other films like Godfather or, you know what I mean? Like, within the Rambo world, the Rambo franchise world, the characters in this film are fleshed out. We see more of the Rambo character here than we have in any film. In every other film, even part 1 a little bit, we don't get to know who Rambo is at all. And that actually has always kind of bothered me. I want to know what's in his head and what's going on and why is he so hurt and twisted. And in this film, we actually see him taking... Did you catch that he was taking medication?
Oh, yeah.
Did you catch that he ran out?
I thought he just threw the bottle away out of frustration.
I think he ran out. And I think that was to show us that now he's completely off his rocker. So not only has he lost his only thing in life that made life beautiful again, he said this to the girl as she died in the truck, that she was the reason that he kept on living and stayed in one place. He didn't wander anymore when he met this family at his ranch, because there was beauty in the world again and he had hope in the world again. And she dies right there in front of him. We also see that he didn't take his medication anymore. I think that's to show that he was, in the real world, he was taking medication for like probably psychotic behavior. Because he talks about how he barely keeps the lid on of his rage every day.
So the $1 million question.
Okay.
Do you think he died at the end?
Yes.
Me too. Because, for a couple of reasons, it makes no sense for him not to die.
Agreed.
He's extremely wounded. He's old. He's by himself in a secluded area. I just don't see how John's going to, MacGyver himself out of that one. But it's also just, it's the 5th movie. It's like, you so rarely get, most storytellers can't tell a 3-part story.
Right.
Without having at least one of the parts be so bad that it kind of, ruins the overall arch. I mean, he's been able to, over almost 40 years, make 5 different, very different films in 5 very different locations with very different tones.
Yeah.
Tracking this character, and it makes perfect sense for him to die in that rocking chair on the porch of the house that he wanted to go back and die at. But what I would have done differently is I would have had the rocking chair noticeably quit rocking when it was zooming out. I would have had it get a little bit further, and you see that the rocking stop, and it's still, and it zooms out.
That would have been a great editing too. That would have been great.
But him riding on the horse into the sunset, I mean, what else is that supposed to symbolize?
Exactly. Well, yeah, he rode off into the sunset.
What else does that symbolize?
I understand is that he dies in the land that he loves, alone, as he's always been.
Why would you continue it? All of his antagonists are dead.
Yeah.
All of his allies are dead. He is an old man. Let's be real. Like Stallone, this was Stallone's last chance. He's 73. He's not going to have another 10 years to wait to do another Rambo movie.
No, at the rate that he goes at, there's no way. He would have to... The only scenario, because money talks, let's just say that's the world movies are made to make money, because that's their business. That's fine. There's no shame in that it's a business. It's a movie business. If this movie made $500 million, which it won't, I'm just saying it had to be something astronomically big where they're like, holy smokes, there's still some blood we can squeeze out of this blood franchise.
Unfortunately, they would go, well, let's use some of that space age face technology and make him young.
Maybe,
and
it won't happen.
Do a prequel about him in Vietnam the first time. Yeah, I don't want them to do that.
I agree. I think he dies. I think we're left to believe, but he dies off screen. For our listeners, we don't see him die on screen. I had an ending. I did have an ending, and I like yours too. And mine's kind of like that too. Keep in mind, this was like a big firefight on American land, so you got to figure the authorities were probably called at some point, like 911. Yeah, there's like mass explosions and shootings about 2 miles down the road. My neighbor, the Rambos.
Just the smoke. I mean,
right. So it would have been nice to see, just as he's sitting in his rocking chair, and that same panning out, like the drone shot of him panning out, him on his rocking chair. We see the authorities come over his land, get out of their car as the camera is panning out. They're drawing their weapons. And we're led to believe at this point that whether he's dead or not, he's back to being held by the police again, like he was in First Blood, that full circle.
Oh, wow.
And then the credits roll as the police slowly make their way to him. And just as they're about to touch him, it goes to black.
That would have been good. But you would have had to have done a definite him dying, though.
Here's when the rocking chair stops just as the police come up to him, and then black.
Okay, I like that because that's ambiguous.
Yeah.
Because that's like Inception with the top spinning.
Yes, exactly.
At the end, I don't know exactly how you would shoot it. Kind of where the camera would be behind the rocking chair.
Okay.
And you see the cop come up the stairs, and as the cop comes in view, implying that if you were looking out Rambo's eyes, you'd see the cop then the rocking chair stops as the cop's looking at him, because that goes, he could be quitting the rocking to pay attention to the person in front of him, or he could have died, and then the movie ends.
Right. I love it. Like, this isn't the fanboy me. The fanboy me makes me want to have a better film. Is this a perfect film? No.
No.
But as a fanboy, we are watching a Sylvester Stallone big screen release movie in 2019. Wrap your head around that.
I was excited when it got announced that they were doing fifth Rambo, and I was kind of like, oh, man, are they really doing that? And they're like, well, it's going to be called Last Blood. And I was like, well, that's badass. And I said, well, who's he fighting? And it was like, oh, the cartel. I'm like, well, I'm in. Like, how is that not going to be entertaining? How is that not going to be an entertaining film? Now, David Morrell, the original author who wrote the First Blood novel, has come out against the film. He wishes that he wasn't even associated with the movie because of how bad he thinks that they got John Rambo's character. I put a lot of weight on that because I know this sounds silly. It takes a lot of the fun out of it for me if the original source artist hates it. Or like any Alan Moore movie that I enjoy, Watchmen, V for Vendetta, any of that, he shits all over him. He hates them. Hates them. Right. And so it always kind of is like, it's hard to enjoy it when the guy who made it doesn't enjoy it. But anyway, he said he didn't like it. So I thought, that's his opinion. Obviously, he knows Rambo better than anybody. He created the character. But then he said that he liked Rambo 4.
Right, which is weird.
And he was like, I thought Rambo 4 had a little too much violence, but I liked it. And I'm like, well, how did you like Rambo 4, but you don't think Rambo 5 captured the essence of the character? Because with Rambo 4, I can't even remember the story. I know it was Burma. I know that he lived there. I know that there were missionaries that got kidnapped, and that's all I remember.
That's what I mean. Rambo 5 has a storyline. There's literally a beginning, middle, and last act. Like, it actually is a proper movie.
I'm going to be honest. If you're talking about could you just do a generic change it from John Rambo to John Smith, I honestly think that's more Rambo 4. What do you call that stuff in like storytelling? Oh, it's like a Latin term. Deus ex machina.
Sounds right.
Yeah. Essentially, it's when you have something come up in the plot that's so advantageous that it's almost too hacky.
Right.
You know? So like in Dodgeball, the very end where they just happen to get the giant chest of money, it has that word on it because it's like a play on that. But anyway, what I'm getting at is Rambo 4, Rambo is just that. You could have had the movie be about these missionaries going into a dangerous place. Oh, no, we're kidnapped. What are we going to do? Oh, well, there's some sketchy old Vietnam vet who never left, who lives up the road, named John. Well, maybe he can help, and then he helped. That could be a movie about any character ever. Right. So I don't know.
Great point.
He wrote the book. Now, have you read the novel First Blood?
So yeah, in the book, like you said before, the Rambo character kills all the cops. So just like Colonel Trauma says, he wins by attrition.
Yeah.
He disposes of the enemy, regardless of who they are, to kill, period. So ironically, the character description in part 1 fits the character description and the actions of part 5 best of all the films. I will say this to David Morrell. Thank you so much for creating a wonderful character on the page. But I will argue when it comes to the film world, the Rambo universe and the Rambo cinematic universe, RCU, it's different than the comics. It's different than the books. Marvel's made that clear that the cinematic universe is not the comics that you're picking up at the store. It's a cinematic universe. The Rambo character is a cinematic universe. It is not from the novel. And so I will argue that Stallone owns the character on screen. It's left the pages from 30 or almost 40 years ago when it was written, and there's no shame in that. It's just it's a different universe. It's a Rambo character, but he's, it's on screen, not on the page.
Some big differences in the novel compared to the movie is, I think the biggest one is that Rambo commits suicide at the end.
Right.
That obviously would change the entire course of the film franchise. You can actually see a deleted scene. They had shot that ending before.
Yes.
And then obviously didn't use it. I was a lot younger when I read the book, so it might, maybe it's a little different than I'm remembering it. But I also thought that David Morrell's version of Rambo was more animalistic. In Rambo, it's kind of like, hey, I'm a normal dude, but I got PTSD, and when you stress me out, it kind of makes me wig out. Whereas in the book, Rambo needs to be like hospitalized. He's having like a full psychotic episode.
That's what happens in part 5.
Yeah, in the book, he loses his mind because they try to cut it. He has this giant hobo beard.
Right.
And they're trying to cut his beard off, and that's when he takes the razor and he guts one of the policemen with it. Now that we talked about that, my stance on David Morrell's comments on Rambo 5 are even more bewildered. Novel version is even more like Rambo 5. Oh, wow, I didn't even, yeah.
When he disposes of these people in the last 20, 25 minutes of the film, he does so in a caged animal released kind of way. He's like, you have come into my wilderness, your enemy animals in my animal wilderness, and he disposes of them like animals.
For people who haven't read the book, in the book, you might not want to hear this if you're an animal lover. Do you remember what he does to the guy that the cops bring out with the bloodhounds? The old man with the shotgun and his bloodhounds to track him? In the book, he ties that guy to his dogs and runs the dogs off a cliff with him.
Oh, yes.
That's a whole different vibe than what he's doing in the film universe. Like, that's psychotic. And that's not even a cop he did it to. It was just the dog handler.
It's awesome. I love it. Again, that's the character in part 5. That's the character in part 5.
That's okay. We do just briefly have to talk about how fun the end is with all the booby traps. I've always had this theory in the realm of storytelling, you can never fail with an angry dude movie. And an angry dude movie just needs an angry dude with an objective. So like Taken. Taken is your quintessential angry dude movie.
Sure.
He's an angry dude. He has the means to be violent, and he has a reason to be violent.
Yeah, we love it.
And you love it. And you love it. And you don't think anything more about it. Before the movie trailer was even made, if you just were like, they're making a Rambo movie where his PTSD is finally actualized and he's building actual tunnels in the ground now, and he's just going to set up a bunch of makeshift booby traps, and it's going to be 20 straight minutes of just Hispanic cartel members falling into booby traps, I'd be like, I'm there. You could have just sold me a ticket for a 20-minute session of the booby traps. Like, I would have just walked in, watched that, walked out.
And that's what we did.
I mean, some of it was a little unnecessary, where it was like it showed that he modified some of the shotgun rounds to have like magnesium in them to like explode.
They have to show that to see why these guys were on fire after a shotgun shot, or else you're going to be asking, why did they go on fire when they got shot by a shotgun?
You're putting the cart before the horse.
Okay.
Why did Rambo have any? Why did you need to do that, Rambo? Like, was it?
I think he knew as a character this was his last hurrah. Yeah, he expelled everything he had left in his ammo, munitions, depot. This is his last hurrah.
It makes me wonder if that maybe some of those booby traps had been like floating around in his head since like Rambo 3. Man, I really wish I could have an excuse to finally try that stick a pipe through the wall and stab him in the head thing while they walk by.
Yeah.
Well, those are my favorite too, were some booby traps where it's like, yeah, he's a real, he's a creative murderous genius. I'm like, well, I could just hit a guy in the head with an axe. Some of it wasn't that creative. What do you think about when he corralled the main cartel guy up into that barn? He was obviously trying to lead him a certain way.
He brought him in like a caged animal. He trapped him like an animal in a cage, yeah.
As he was walking, I had this childlike glee. Did you see Endgame?
Yes. When
you kind of realize that you haven't seen that Captain America's holding Thor's hammer.
Right.
But you have that moment where you're like, oh my God, he did it. It's happening.
Right.
I had that moment of glee when that cartel member was running up into that barn, because I was like, oh my God, he hasn't used his bow and arrow yet. I was like,
that's right.
I was like, this is the dopest thing ever.
Pins him to the barn door.
It rips his heart out.
Yeah, how graphic was that?
I mean, it was. So he said he was going to rip his heart out. I mean,
Yeah.
you kind of put me in the corner here, Rambo. Like, what am I?
Well, Rambo's a man of his word, and he's literal.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. What he said he was going to rip your heart out. What else is he supposed to do now?
It's so terrible. They actually had the sound effect of the beating heart as he's holding it.
If I was in a situation like that where I'm like, I'm so mad at you, I'm going to try and rip your heart out, I would not have been that clean with it. I would have pulled out 2 chambers of the heart.
Yeah.
He got the whole thing nice and perfect.
Well, remember, he's a hunter.
Okay, but I mean, I think it would have been less cheesy if he had pulled out just like a squished up black red mask. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, right.
Where it's
right.
like, you, I guess this is your heart. Yeah, I pulled something out of your chest, and you're gonna die now.
Oh, that was great. My question is, who did it better, the Silac from Temple of Doom?
I don't know.
Who pulled the heart out better?
Rambo or the witch doctor guy in Indiana Jones?
Yeah, I think his name was Silac, wasn't it?
I don't remember, but I think you're trying to compare apples to oranges because just because you're ripping a heart out, well, he was ripping a heart out in a ceremony. Rambo was ripping a heart out more on his own time,
That's true. Yeah, Rambo was out of revenge and anger, whereas Silac was just a nice religious ceremony.
Well, I will say that I'm bummed that it is the end of the Rambo franchise.
It is. It's over. It's done.
'Cause it has to be. It just has to be. I personally am not a fan of reboots. I'm not a fan of recasting famous characters.
Okay.
I personally would not want to see another Rambo. I would not want to see... We're going to get the guy who played Aquaman, and he's going to be the new Rambo. Like, I don't want that. Like, to me, Rambo is Stallone.
Right.
Stallone is Rambo. That's it.
I do have one question, though. Would you be up for an Amazon or Netflix type cable show and of course the actor would be recast, the character would be recast, of his days in Vietnam?
No, because that's something else when it comes to storytelling that I'm kind of a stickler for. Do you like Alien?
The franchise?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I love the Alien movies. Yeah, Alien 1 and 2 in particular, of course, but yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. So, like, when I was a kid, I was always just fascinated in Alien by the other aliens that they find at the beginning that is supposed to be a mystery, that you just don't know. Did those aliens have the xenomorphs as pets? Did they have them as weapons? Was it an infection?
Right.
You don't know. You just know that you are the astronaut that's now stumbled upon these eggs.
Right.
And then 30 years later, they make Prometheus, and you figure out this whole detailed backstory. I don't like that.
Right, okay.
So, like, with Rambo, I know that he wanted to be a soldier, joined, got himself in Vietnam, was a POW, was tortured, thrown back to the Pacific Northwest, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I like, nothing else is going to add to that.
Okay, fair. That's fair. Yeah. So where is your ranking on this film in the 5? I will say it's 1, 2, 5, 3, 4.
Oh, man. I could maybe switch 3 and 4.
Okay.
Because I found 4 to be incredibly entertaining.
Well, sure. You're not bored watching it.
Yeah, and 3 would probably be my last one.
Okay.
Not necessarily because it's the worst. It's just the one I know the least.
Sure.
I've seen First Blood and First Blood Part 2 like a ton of times, but
sure.
I've probably only seen Rambo 3 2 or 3 times.
It's a fun movie. It's I always say Rambo 3 is Rambo 3: The Last Crusade. It's kind of a fun little romp. Colonel Trauman's the Sean Connery character.
What's interesting about Stallone? He could have made every one of these damn movies in Vietnam.
Yeah, sure.
He could have, if he wanted to, stick to Southeast Asia and done it all in there. I mean, he threw in Afghanistan. He threw in Burma.
I think the Rambo character is kind of like James Bond. Like, every film stands alone a little bit. Each film has its own story, its own location. That's, I think, something good about it. Not every Rambo movie is in Philadelphia. We actually have him going throughout. He's a globetrotter. He's a true globetrotter.
one Rambo movie is more violence and action than an average person, even a soldier, is going to experience in their life.
Sure.
So it makes sense that the whole story of Rambo is 50 years of him wandering from place to place, and then every 12 years he has to get into some giant violent struggle.
It's almost what happens, yeah.
And then 12 more years of, what was he, stick fighting in Bangkok?
He was bored. He just decided to be a stick fighter. I love it. In part 4, he's a snake catcher. Yeah, it's... Yeah.
But I mean, that's just, I guess that's what you do when you just float around the Asian continent for 2 decades. So
what did you rank it as? So it's number 3 on your list.
I would say that this is probably a healthy third. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. So we both agree it's solid movie. It's fun. In the Rambo world and the Rambo franchise, if you're a Rambo fan, I can't imagine walking away from this saying this was a terrible movie. Though there are those that are doing it, and I understand the reasons. But for a Rambo franchise, this is number 3 for me. 1, 2, 5. 3, 4. There you go.
That's actually funny. That is literally what I texted Bob, my podcasting partner, when I got out of the movie. We were in like a group thread, and I texted everybody, and I was like, I don't understand how a Rambo fan couldn't enjoy that movie. If you like Rambo, you are going to enjoy the film. And then it's like all the critics are shitting on it. It feels hack almost at this point to make these kind of comments, but why do I care? What do I care what a damn film critic thinks about the 5th Rambo? It's 2019. Film critics are a thing of the past that need to be phased out.
I agree. I don't listen to anything they have to say. I'm always kind of curious in the sense of like, oh, gee, I wonder if this is getting quote-unquote good buzz. But at the same time, I have never not seen a film because of a critic, and I've never seen a film because of a critic. I will just see what I want to see when I want to see it.
Roger Ebert, who actually I don't hate. I think as far as a film critic goes, he's about as top notch.
Yep.
He put here the 5 movies I hated the most, and one of them was Tommy Boy. And I'm like, Tommy Boy is a slapstick comedy. Why are you even grading it? It's an actual serious film. It's a romp fest. It's supposed to be silly.
I agree.
I'm happy Rambo has a happy ending. Well, it wasn't very happy, but he
closure.
he has some closure, some good old closure.
So you and I both agree he died at the end.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Zib, this has been an absolute pleasure. I love your show. So all my listeners, check out the No Redeeming Qualities podcast. A lot of fun. It's much, much more blue than what you listen to on my show.
Yes. I mean, it is called No Redeeming Qualities, so...
Don't let the title fool you. You guys are a great comedy team. You guys have some really great insights on a variety of topics, pulp culture, the news. You do, like, Shark Week replacements called... your last one was Squids? Was that your last?
Our last one was Gators.
Gators, that's right. So you done Squid and Gators.
We call it Alternative Shark Week. It's for people who are just tired of sharks. So the first time we did it was Squids. This year was Gators, and we don't know what next year's going to be.
Sure.
We were thinking about Shrimp Week, but those bastards at Red Lobster already took that.
Oh, wow. But you guys are, like I said, variety of topics, stuff that's on the news, and you guys are really good, and I really enjoy your show. But, yeah, for my listeners who are used to a PG-type show, just be forewarned, it's a 18 and over show, so not safe for work.
And you can find that at nrqpodcast.com and anywhere else podcasts are found. We have a new episode drop every Monday. So
awesome. Well, it's been a real pleasure, and thanks for coming on the show, and I hope to have you on again, of course.
Oh, yeah, me too. It was a lot of fun.
All right, brother.
All right, thank you.
And take care.
You too.